We are muted.
Okay, so I guess we're all here. Now we have a quorum. So I'd like to start off with agenda item 1, which is to call the Monday, June 14th, 2021 meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners Mule Deer Enhancement Program Management Area 14 Subcommittee to order at 6:05 p.m. Please remember, this is a recorded open public meeting and will be entered into public record. Tom, would you like to call roll call, please?
Yep, I will do that. I would ask the folks, when I call roll here, if you don't mind, maybe just kind of give a quick introduction of yourself. Just, maybe if you're representing anybody in particular, or maybe a little bit about, your interest in participating on the mule deer team, local landowner or sportsman or Eureka County resource guy or what have you. But anyway, we'll go in alphabetical order here. Anthony Miller.
Okay, I'm here from Eureka. I've been here for about 15 years now. I'm a local landowner, got a farm here. Also run Classic Diamond Guide Service here in Eureka. So definitely do have some interest in the mule deer, what's going on around here.
All righty, great. Thanks, Anthony. Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks, live here in Eureka, lifelong resident, hunted mule deer and other wildlife species here all my life. And one of the main interests now, I'm getting older and I've got sons and grandkids I want to see things improve for, as well as everybody in general.
All right, appreciate it, Bill. Clint Garrett.
Hello, everybody. I'm formerly the Eureka County game biologist for the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Currently, I'm the Western Region landowner comp tag biologist. Appreciate everybody being here.
Thank you, Clint. Jake Tibbetts.
Good evening, Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for Eureka County, and I work closely with our local advisory board to manage wildlife, attend nearly all of their meetings, and a lot of the on-the-ground projects that they've wanted to do over the year, habitat enhancements and involvement, that I typically lead the effort in getting those done on the ground after they've identified things they want to do. So I'm excited about the portions of, identifying the issues and then trying to get some good work done on the ground. So that's what I'm excited about.
All right, appreciate it, Jake. Jamie Halpin.
Here, same as the majority of everyone, lived here all my life, went away to college, come back, just interested to see what we could do with this program to help the deer herds in Nevada, make progress in this area and, see what happens with the rest of the state as well.
All right, thanks, Jamie. We appreciate the participation. Maddie Stout is not present. She is hard at work on a habitat working crew up in the Bruno. Trent Gordon is also not in attendance. He is busy vacationing, I believe. So, all right. That's about all I got for roll calls. Well,
You're muted.
you're muted there, Clint.
Thank you. All right, so we can move on to agenda item 2, approval of agenda. The subcommittee will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The chairman, in his discretion or upon request, may take items out of order, combine items for consideration by the subcommittee, and may remove items from the agenda at any time. Due to the approval of the agenda being an action item, we'll take public comment prior to taking action. Persons wishing to comment are invited to raise their virtual hands in the virtual meeting forum. Each person offering public comment during this period will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. The chair may allow persons representing groups to speak for 6 minutes, or people may provide written public comment via email to ndowgame@ndow.org, which is ndowgame@ndow.org. At this time, I'd like to take a public comment break. Okay, Tom, I've spent a couple minutes. Have we received any public comment?
Nope, no public comment.
Okay. So since this is an action item, we need a motion and a second here to approve or modify the agenda. Can I get a motion from somebody on the committee?
This is
I'll make that
Jake.
motion.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay, it looks like Jamie Halpin first and Jake Tibbetts second.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3. Agenda item 3 is the report on Mule Deer Enhancement Program for Management Area 14. Please hold all questions and comments until after the presentation. And so now I'll give a brief overview of the MDE process and the herd status presentation. Give me a second to get it set up here. Okay, can everybody see that?
I can.
Yeah, we can see it here good.
Okay. So this is the presentation with a brief overview of the MDEP process and status of the Area 14 deer herd. You guys still see me on video?
No, you're good.
We don't see you, but just see your name.
Okay, thanks. All right. So first we'll discuss the statewide MDEP concept. The Oversight Committee and NDOW staff, area teams, MDEP moving forward information. And then on to the second part, which will be the Eureka County MDEP Area 14, some geographical locations, team members, population metrics, habitat, some limiting factors and impacts, and some recent conservation efforts, and then what's next. All right, so the basic NDEP concept is establish a statewide oversight committee providing guidance to the Wildlife Commission and NDOW with insight from the area MDEP teams. These area MDEP teams represent various areas and hunt unit groups throughout the state. These teams are comprised of NDOW game and habitat biologists, CAB members, ranchers, farmers, sportsmen, land management agencies, and members of the public. NDOW biologists will provide each team with information related to mule deer herds for their area. The area teams will then discuss those limiting factors for mule deer in their areas and make recommendations for management. So there's the MDE Oversight Committee, which is comprised of Casey Keel, Wildlife Commissioner, the chairman, John Almberg, Wildlife Commissioner, Tom Barnes, who's a Wildlife Commissioner, Shane Rogers, a Wildlife Commissioner, Charlie Clements, the USDA Rangeland Scientist, Jeremy Drew, Resource Specialist and former Wildlife Commission Chairman, Corey Lytle, Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited, Jim Rackley, Nevada Muleys, Josh Vittori, former president of NBU, and it's yet to be determined for a BLM and a U.S. Forest Service representative. With the NDOW staff, the Oversight Committee, there's Mike Scott, who is our Game Division Administrator, Cody Schroeder, the Game Division Staff Biologist for Mule Deer, and then Alan Janae, the Habitat Division Administrator. So there's the statewide county MDEP teams. These are the statewide teams. Each one of these teams has had a kickoff meeting similar to the one here where NDOW biologists will give a presentation on the status of mule deer herds and relevant issues for their respective mule deer areas. As we move forward, there will be annual field trips to discuss current, past, or future projects, habitat conditions, funding, and any other relevant information on moving forward, given all COVID guidelines are followed and can be done safely. Hopefully we're past all that. These are the needs assessment sheets. These next two slides are the sheets where the team will sit down to evaluate and assess the needs as well as rank those needs in priority after the field trips. 0 being the lowest priority and 5 being the highest priority. These sheets, I believe, have been recently revised and may not even be finalized yet, but Tom will go over the updated forms and discuss more of the process at the end of the presentation. This needs assessment sheet has factors where there's wildfire and invasives, conifer invasion, lack of diversity, lack of connectivity, predation, wildlife health and disease, and data gaps. This is the second sheet the team needs to fill out. These are limiting factors within Area 14 and are also ranked with a rating of 0 to 5. Again, 0 being the lowest priority and 5 being the highest priority. Some of these limiting factors being wildland fire, PJ encroachment, climate, migration corridors, and some direct and indirect human impacts. Then after the sheets are completed and identified, there is the project prioritization phase, which is up to 3 project proposals will be submitted to NDOW supervising game biologists annually. And the MDEP Oversight Committee will then score projects and provide a prioritized project list to NDOW staff. Some funding for projects is currently through the Heritage Fund, Dream Tag, NGO partners, federal land management agencies, the Predator Fund, federal grants, and the Habitat Conservation Fee. So now we can dive into part 2 of the presentation and the management of Area 14. All right, first we'll have the geographical location and the team members of population metrics, harvest and survey data, some major challenges impacting deer, the limiting factors, some recent conservation efforts with shrub planting, wildlife water developments, Project 40 and the collaring effort, and then what's next with 3 bars restoration and some PJ treatments. So this is Management Area 14, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and is comprised of 5 hunt units commonly known as Hunt Unit 141, which is the Cortez Range, 142, which is the Sulphur Springs Range, 143, which is Roberts Mountain Range, and 144, which is the Diamond Range, and 145, which is the Fish Creek Range. Almost all of this is within Eureka County. And here are our MDEP Area 14 members, most of which have already introduced themselves, but Trent Gordon is currently on vacation and Maddie's in the field this week. So we have myself, a game biologist with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. We have Maddie Stout, the habitat biologist with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. We have a CAB member, Trent Gordon from Eureka County, and we have public sportsman Bill Hicks from Eureka County, and from the farming and ranching end, we have Jamie Halpin of Eureka County, Anthony Miller of Eureka County, and as the resource manager for Eureka County, we have Jake Tibbetts. So this is the Western Region Low Climatic Center's data from the Eureka Airport gauge going back to 1976. Black line shows a moving average with the fluctuation of precipitation through the years. The red line shows the mean for this gauge at 11.68 inches, and the yellow bars are the annual precipitation. I'll use this data as we go through the slides for comparisons with the population estimates and survey data, so you can see how the fluctuations of precipitation from year to year is comparable to the fluctuations of total population numbers and survey ratios from year to year. This comparison is important because the timing of precipitation and amount is key to deer and their body condition, primarily how healthy they go into fawning through the summer and onto the rut, and then on to surviving the winter conditions. So you can see all the peaks and the valleys in through this graph showing the precip and how it's either above, which is not many years, and mostly below through the timeline. There's an increase in precipitation in the late 70s, leading into the 80s. It shows a few dry years leading into the big winter of 87, which you'll see led to the initial population decline in the next slide. Then on to the 90s, where there is a below average precipitation until the mid 90s to around average. And then another drop in 99 through 2003, where there was decent precip until 2008. And then somewhat favorable to above average precip from 2009 to present, with this last year being a significant drop, and actually the driest year on record for this gauge at 4.18 inches. The table on the right shows 10-year averages for the last 50 years. In the 70s through to the early 80s, 13.3 per annual, 81 to 90, 12.3, 91 to 2000, 10.1, 2000 to 2010, 11, and then 2011 to 2020, 11.4. But you can just see this drop in through here to where we're at for the last decade at 11.4 inches for average. Keep in mind, this gauge is just under 6,000 feet in elevation. Okay, so this is a graph of the population estimate going back to 1976, which is the start date of the Area 14 population model. The orange bars represent total deer and the black lines are trend lines. Here you can see the increase and decreases of the population over time. You can see these peaks from the 70s into the 80s. The highest population estimate in 85, 86, and 87 with an average of 10,600 deer for those years, and then a significant drop from, sorry, I keep losing my cursor here, from 1987 to 1990 at 6,500 total deer, and a somewhat steady increase backed up to 7,900 total deer in 96, and again another drop after 96 to a stable population of around 6,500 deer from 1997 to 2001. And from 2001 to 2004, there was an increase from 6,500 total deer to 7,000 total deer. And then from 2004 to 2010, the total population dropped to 4,300 deer. And for the last, roughly 10 years, we have remained at a total population estimate of 4,300 deer, with this year's population estimate dropping to 3,900 deer. This bottom graph just shows the population being somewhat stable at the last 10 years. And the table on the right shows the averages for the last 40 years. So from 76 to 80 at 4,400, then you see the increase in the 80s and the 90s to 10-year average of 8,300. And then from 1991 to 2000, somewhat stable, slight drop to 7,000. Then it really starts to decline from 2000 to 2010, 6,100, and then 2011 to 2020 is 4,300. To what our population estimate is to this year at 3,900 total deer. Okay, so through two forms of data collection, we monitor this deer population through hunter and survey data. The hunter return cards are mandatory. They give us days hunted, buck harvest, percent 4-point harvest, doe harvest, which of course gives us then total harvest. This is good information received back from the hunters that help drive the model and help with the quota setting process. There's a high return rate, and a percent 4-point information is also used following our set management guidelines. So for both spring and fall surveys, we look for ratios, buck to doe and fawn to doe ratios in the fall and fawn to adult ratios in the spring. For our aerial surveys, our fall surveys have been 2 out of 5 years for at least the last 10 years. This is to obtain post-season buck ratios and fawn production. The fall surveys are used to shore up our model by comparing what was observed on the survey with the buck to doe ratio within the model and for following set management guidelines. Spring surveys have been flown every year since 1977, and they're used to obtain fawn recruitment. Because bucks have already shed their antlers in the spring, the ratio of fawns is to adult deer. There's no buck ratio. Spring surveys are to scrutinize the fawn recruitment, and this recruitment from one year to the next is what drives the population model, showing, if any, increases or decreases in the total population. So both the hunter data and the aerial survey data are used in our models and with the quota setting process. This is a graph of the total buck and percent 4-point harvest. Orange colored bars represent percent 4-point harvest with a red trend line, and the black lines represent a total buck harvest in 83, 85, and 2010, showing the high years, area 14 with just under or at 40%. When you add the linear line to percent 4-point harvest through the years, you have a very stable harvest of 30% for 4-point or better in area 14. The table on the right shows the averages for the last 40 years. 76 to 80 is 32%, 81 to 90, 32, 91 to 2000, 27%, 2001 to 2010, 33%, 2011 to 2020 is 30%, and this last year was 30%, pretty consistent across the board, around 30%. So this is a graph of the total combined harvest. The orange bars represent the total doe harvest, and the black line represents total buck harvest. These are general and junior hunts combined. So that period in the 80s shows the most harvest of bucks and does. During that time frame, there was 2,261 buck tags issued with 1,432 deer harvested in 1985, and a special antlerless hunt with 343 doe tags and 269 does harvested in 1986. There's also a stable archery, well, actually there was a statewide archery buck tag at the time, which could be some of the harvest in the graph. The table on the right shows averages for the last 40 years, 76 to 80, bull harvest 369, 80s into 90 at 848, 91 to 2000 at 419, 2001 to 2010 at 336, and 2011 to 2020 at 344. And last year at a total combined harvest of 329 deer. I'm sorry, I'd really like to have the cursor up there to go over the graph with everybody as I talk, but my cursor keeps disappearing on me. I think it's just confusing. Sorry about that. So this slide shows the survey coverage areas for the last fall flight in 2018 and this year's spring flight. All the hunt units are surveyed and shows just how much of the area in 14 is surveyed to model this population. So for the fall surveys, an area, well, the last fall survey we had was in 2018, and those areas surveyed are generally the mid to higher elevation areas. They're into their summer range. This is the Fish Creek Range. You can see in 145 down the south end going into 144, which is the Diamond Range, over into 143 Roberts, and into 142, the Sulphur Springs area range, and then in the Cortez Range of 141. For our spring survey area, the last area time we did this survey was this year, this 2021. It was in late February, which is generally mid to lower elevation areas on the winter range. Here you can see we're into the Fish Creek Range area, then into 144 in the Diamond Range, and also into 143 Lone Mountain, Roberts, then to the south end of the Sulphur Springs Range, and then on into 141 of the Cortez Range. Keep in mind, the next few slides, you'll see gaps in the data for the fall surveys. That's just due to the limited amount of time to fly fall surveys throughout the state. Keep in mind, this occurs in November and December, and the concern NDOW has is not to fly over any elk or deer hunters during the hunting season. Weather also complicates flight scheduling on most years. Also, the spring surveys are the most important. And there's been a spring deer survey in 14 every year since 77. And this last year, it occurred in late February, but it can occur in March. Okay, so this is a graph of the fall survey data. The black line represents the fall fawn ratio, and the brown columns represent the observed fall buck ratio. Both have the same colored trend lines. You can see gaps I mentioned earlier in the fall survey data. Area 14 used to be surveyed every year in the fall, but for reasons I'm not sure of, the annual survey stopped in 2001. And for a period of 10 years, from 2001 to 2010, there were only 3 fall surveys completed. Then in 2011, you can see the survey goes from a cycle of 3 on and 2 off. You can also see the lowest observed fawn ratio in 93. See if my cursor will work here. Where the drought leading into the heavy snowfall of 93 coupled with a low average precip in July, August, and September really affected going into 93, really affected the deer and their body condition, creating really poor production for that year. The dotted red line is the postseason or fall management objective that is set in the harvest management guidelines and is used for quota setting process for Area 14. The current postseason buck ratio for standard hunts is 25 to 35 bucks per 100 does, and we target the middle of the range at 30 bucks per 100 does. Tables on the right show both the decreases in the fall ratio and the increase in the fall buck ratio over the last 40 plus years. You just see the high fall fawn ratios in the 76 to 80, and then you start to see it trend downward all the way to the last fall survey in 2018, which was 55 fawns per 100 does. And you see the buck ratio trend upward to what it was in 2018, last observed flight with 33 bucks per 100 does. Okay, this is a graph of the fall observed fawn ratio and precipitation. It shows a good comparison of how yearly precip has an influence on the deer population and how it increases and decreases through the years. On the bottom, you see the blue bars showing the annual precip from the Eureka Airport gauge with the red moving average line. And above, you see the brown bars showing the fall observed fawn ratios, also with the red moving average line. The tables on the right show the fall fawn ratios and the annual precipitation for the last 40 plus years. It's important to understand these time frames when we receive precip and how it affects the population. When we receive above average late summer and early fall precip, the deer generally go into the rut and into winter in good condition, which means they produce more fawns, which leads to more recruitment into the population, but only if we don't have a harsh winter with lots of deep snow and cold extended temperatures. which could cause overwinter fawn loss. So on the other end of the spectrum, if we have a dry summer and fall and go into a cold winter with heavy snow, that's when you see the declines in the population, especially if the winter range is in bad shape. When we have these very dry years, the deer have poor body condition and range conditions are so dry with limited water that they are unable to have good fawn production. The tables on the right show averages for the last 40 plus years. You can see the fawn ratios again dropping from what they were from 76 to 80 down to last 10-year average of 54. And then the annual precipitation, roughly from 76 to 80 at 13.5 inches annual, and then dropping steadily to what it has been around 11 inches for about the last 20 years. Okay, so this is a graph of the spring survey data for Area 14. Orange bars represent observed spring fawn ratios with the trend line, and the black line represents fall observed fawn ratios with the trend line. Both showing the decrease in fawn ratios for the fall and spring surveys. The graph shows the fall production, the spring recruitment numbers dropping, which is why the deer population has been declining. The table on the right shows these declines for the last 40 plus years. So again, we have that fall fawn ratio at 79 dropping to what it was in 2018 at the last survey of 55. And then the spring ratio also dropping down to 36, even further 29, back up to 36 again, and then now at 2020, 28. Okay, so this graph shows the total overwinter fawn loss when compared to annual precipitation and total population estimates. The red stacked area at the bottom is the annual precipitation. The orange bars are the percent fawn loss with an orange trend line, and the black line is the total population estimate with a black trend line. Now, the most accurate years for overwinter fawn loss, where there is a fall survey and a corresponding spring survey for the most part. Not all the years on this graph have corresponding fall and spring surveys. It's not surprising to see that most of the years with high precip have similarities with high overwinter fawn loss, and most of the years with low precip have similarities with low overwinter fawn loss. This given that the majority of the precip we see during a year comes in the form of snow in the winter, and conditions can be harsh for deer during this time of year. So it's also not surprising to see a correlation on most years that a high overwinter fawn loss has similarities with a decrease or stable total population estimate. And on most years with low overwinter fawn loss, you see an increase in the total population estimates. The graph also shows the percent overwinter fawn loss trend line increasing as the total population trend line is decreasing. The historic average for fawn loss in Area 14 is 21%. To me, this is an indication there's a higher frequency in recent years, maybe the last 20 or so, that the Area 14 deer are in poor body condition, possibly due to the combination of climate, PJ encroachment, fire, invasives, noxious weeds, loss of summer habitat, and competition with feral horses. Just an indication of increasing cumulative impacts affecting this herd. Here are some of the limiting factors impacts for the Area 14 deer herd. We have climate, PJ encroachment, fire, invasive and noxious weeds, mining, and horses. There are other impacts that are not on this list from mule deer in general. Some of those are plant senescence, unmanaged livestock grazing, disease, predation, habitat fragmentation, and fencing. But I wanted to focus on those impacts I thought were most important, or at least most important for the Area 14 mule deer herd. I'll address some habitat fragmentation or possible loss of corridors and predation towards the end of the presentation. All right, so this is the U.S. Drought Monitor, which currently shows all of Nevada in a drought. The majority of Eureka County is actually in an extreme drought there in the circle. This graph is also from the U.S. Drought Monitor website. It's drought monitor info on drought cycles and the duration in Nevada from January 2000 to present. Nevada is currently in the start of a drought cycle, and it's common for these drought cycles to last 4 or 5 years. So it's highly possible Nevada will not come out of this current drought cycle until 2025. Here are those cycles in the circles here you can see that last the 4 to 5 year intervals. And then where we're at and currently right now. Okay, so this table has information from the Western Regional Climatic Center Airport Gauge again, Eureka Airport Gauge again. This data goes all the way back to 1888. The blue indicates the well above mean for the month. The red is well below mean for the month, and the yellow is just below the mean for the month. 2019 was a big winter with lots of precip that extended into May and was followed up by a year and a half of dry months. There's some gaps in the data in the late 1800s, 30s, 40s, and 60s, but this data is the longest running precipitation data set I can find for the area. It shows extreme swings in precipitation conditions for the last 2.5 years, with this year being the driest year on record for this gauge at 4.18 inches of total precip, which is 36% of the historic mean. Like I said, it goes all the way back to 1888. All right, so PGA encroachment is an issue in parts of Area 14. That top right photo is of the 2016 chaining project on the west side of the Diamonds at Black Point, which is doing good with lots of bitter brush reestablishment. On that bottom photo on the right is PGA encroachment in the Cottonwood area of the Diamond Range, also on the west side of the Diamond Range. Yeah, this is a map of PJ treatment work done that Jake Tibbetts gave me in units 142, 143, and 144. This is just acknowledging the previous efforts of Jake and those involved with the Black Point Chaining Heritage Project and other private land treatments, especially in the southern portion of the Diamonds, where we've seen some great work done, and in the Black Point area, which is that red point, my cursor works here, right here in 144. I'm sure some of these sites will be visited in the future field trips to evaluate and monitor the treatments. With my calculations, there were 6,787 acres treated. This is a USGS cover density map showing PJ density encroachment in a large part of Area 14. The density roughly goes from green at 0 to 10%, yellow at 10 to 25%, orange at 25 to 50%, and red at greater than 50%. On the map, you can see PJ density increasing from unit 142 southwest into unit 143 and 145, primarily at the upper elevations and units choking out some key summer range for mule deer. As you get closer to the central part of the state, you can see the fire regime and frequency is different when compared to other parts of the state to the north that experience a lot more wildfires with shortened fire frequencies. This altered fire frequency and expansion of PJ reduces forage and water for all wildlife. Lack of fire and density also creates areas of plant senescence. And this late succession leads to PJ encroachment, creating a unique fire regime that chokes out grasses and browse that deer thrive on. As these PJ stands increase in size and density, the grass, forb, and brush communities start to die off due to the tree's ability to outcompete with native plant communities for water and sunlight. Once this threshold has been crossed, it's very hard to bring it back and make it productive again for deer. So fires are an issue in certain parts of Area 14. The top photo is of Cortez Cottonwood fire in September of 2017, which is just under 14,000 acres. The bottom photo on the right is of the Diamond fire in September 2015 at just over 7,000 acres. And these are maps of past fires throughout Area 14. And the one on the top left is just with a topography layer added to it. But the concerns with fire is that at these lower elevations, this is where sheetgrass replaces native forbs, grasses, and shrubs, which are key forage for mule deer. These areas are generally drier with less deep, loamy soils, and it takes natives longer to reestablish. This is why sheetgrass is so invasive, because it's a winter annual. It takes advantage of the wet conditions and invades the low elevation burn sites prior to the natives that key in on the precip later on in the spring. There are benefits to fires at the mid to upper elevations, generally above 7,000 feet in elevation. This benefit could be seen in some of Area 14, where large portions of PJ have encroached and created a unique fire regime. There are also areas where there may be plant senescence on shrubs that are older and not as productive. This could be limiting nutritional value and digestibility for deer. Initially, these burns are negative, but can be productive fairly quickly with the right conditions. The unit with the biggest impacts due to fire is Unit 141, which is the Cortez range. It has the most acreage lost due to wildfires. It's significant across all elevations. It encompasses winter and summer range, and the last big fire was in Cottonwood in 2017. As far as Hunt Unit 142 goes, there is significant winter range loss, mostly mid to low elevation. The Table Mountain Fire 1985, the Sadler Fire of 99. In Hunt Unit 143, there's moderate loss at mid to low elevation with the Fraser Fire in 2012. As far as Hunt Unit 144 goes, there's some significant loss mid to low elevation with the Diamond Fire 2015, the Cold Creek Fire 86, and the two Pinto fires in 2012 and 2016. For the most part, Hunt Unit 145 has no loss of acreage. There are invasive and noxious weeds in Area 14. The top photo is of thistles in Meadow Canyon, the Roberts Creek area in July of 2013, along a fence and disturbance with the road there. And at the bottom is a photo of sheetgrass in the Fraser Creek area of Roberts in April of 2014 after the fire in August of 2012. Invasive plants and noxious weeds are one of the largest disruptors of the ecosystem. It can colonize a lot of different habitats, reproduce rapidly with the right conditions, and aggressively outcompete native species. These are maps of annual grasses in Area 14 from USGS and the associated BLM fire polygon layer past wildfires. Several of these areas have mainly been taken over by sheetgrass. The more dense the stand of annual grass, the darker the color on the background map there. Here's what most of us already know about sheetgrass. It's aggressive, it invades burned and disturbed areas. It changes the fire frequency, shortens it, outcompetes natives. It's a winter annual. There's monotypic stands that cannot support mule deer, increases soil erosion, and eliminates a lot of the thermal cover. You can see that this fires, like I was talking about with the Pinto fire right here, the Diamond Fire, those are crucial, not big, but crucial because they are in the fawning grounds for that diamond range in Unit 144. You can see the Fraser Fire up here in 143, and that is in some pretty good deer habitat as well. It is slow to rebound, but it has a lot of thistle in it right now. The Sulphur Springs range with Table Mountain, which was key winter habitat, and the Sadler Fire. For some of the upper elevations actually look decent and have some browse. Cortez is the most affected and has some big stands of monotypic cheatgrass. The last being the Cottonwood Fire, which burns some key deer habitat. Unfortunately, this fire occurred late in the fire season on a big fire year when funding and seed availability were pretty limited and very little rehab was done. Definitely an area to visit in the future, field trips for treatment. This is a scary slide for me, considering Medusa head is worse for the ecosystem than sheetgrass. This is the USGS annual grass layer again, with Medusa head invasion in the Frenchy Flat area of the North Cortez range. Medusa head is a winter annual. It was first reported in the 1880s. It's very flammable, crowds out native and non-native species. There's no nutritional value for mule deer. And according to the USDA, it is expanding at a rate of 12% per year and can reduce livestock grazing by 80% when present. This just shows that Cortez range with the Medusa head and the dark annual grass that has invaded in those areas due to all the fires that have compounded in that area. You can see Medusa head here, right in that corner in North Cortez. There's active open pit mining in the Cortez Range and in the Roberts Mountain areas. The top photo is of the water line that could be installed south of Roberts Mountain from the Mount Hope Moly mine if funding is secured in the future. The bottom photo on the right is of the west side of Mount Tenabo, just south of the Cortez mine. All right, these are boundary maps of the largest and current open pit mines in Area 14. Other than the Diamond Range, Summer Range is very limited in Area 14, so loss of this crucial seasonal habitat is key to mule deer overall population numbers. These losses of Summer Range include, Hunt Unit 141 of the Cortez Range, Mount Tenabo. It's the Cortez Mine and the Gold Rush Project, and where there could be possible population loss and displacement, which is right here. Hunt Unit 143, West Roberts Mountain area with McEwen Mine and the Gold Bar Project, which also could have possible population loss and displacement. Generally, during surveys, depending on the year, we see around 100 deer in that portion of Unit 141 in the Cortez Range, and roughly 350 deer that move back and forth between the Sulphur Springs Range and Lone Mountain, and also into that West Roberts Mountain area, Unit 143 around the McEwen Mine. All right, so horses are still well above appropriate management level in the Roberts herd management area. The bottom photo is of a herd of horses in Roberts Mountain. These are maps of the herd areas and the herd management areas in Area 14. Horse population numbers were extremely high prior to last year's gather in the Cortez and Diamond Range, and well above AML in the Roberts Mountain HMA. Areas with these high AMLs create competition with wildlife for all the available resources. This competition is mainly with water and riparian areas, but with increasing numbers and drought conditions, forage can be very limited and overutilized on the range. Prior to that gather, the Diamond Hills North HMA was at 2,011%. The Diamond Hills South HMA was at 1,822%. The entire Diamond Complex prior to gather was at 712% above AML. These gathers in the Diamond Complex was in September of 2020, where they gathered 1,196 horses, and in the Cortez Range, there was a gather of 1,328 horses, for a total gather of 2,524 horses. We're definitely optimistic on those removal and the increase in the production of that range, hopefully into recovery if we can get some precipitation, some response, and some good climate. This is a graph on the current horse numbers within Area 14. The blue columns are the high AML for the HMA, and the gray column is the horse numbers as of March 2021. The red line shows the percent above AML. These numbers are from the BLM website for March 2020, with a 20% full recruitment added to get the March 2021 numbers. Originally, HAs turned into HMAs. HAs are herd areas and HMAs are herd management areas. The difference being current HAs are public lands with limited resources and not sustainable for long-term use by horses. HMAs are deemed to be public lands with the available resources for sustaining established AML, which is, again, the appropriate management level. When funding is available, the goal is to remove as many horses as possible from those herd areas. Unit units 141 and 142 do not have any HAs or HMAs, thus providing a pretty good opportunity for gathers. And there are no wild horse territories in Area 14. You can see here on this graph that Roberts Mountain being well above AML and currently is probably one of the most prominent areas that would need to gather within Area 14 at 816% above AML. Sorry, this is a pretty cluttered map. This is all the previous map layers that I used showing the current impacts at a landscape level for Area 14. Many of the uses and impacts on the landscape level, and not all of them are beneficial for mule deer habitat. Managing all of these impacts is challenging, especially for everyone concerned with mule deer and their habitat. 67% of Nevada's public land, and these are the multiple uses and impacts that occur throughout Area 14. These impacts that are on this map are climate, PJ encroachment, fire, invasive, noxious weeds, mining, and the herd management areas and horses. Here are some of the most recent conservation efforts in the next few slides. This top photo is of a tank addition at Fish Creek Range to increase overall storage for mule deer. It actually targeted mule deer. This bottom right photo is of a collared doe in the Mount Hope area that died in spring of 2019 when we had all that wet, cold weather that continued through the month of May. During the necropsy, I observed the doe was pregnant and within days of giving birth. It's important to understand that spring mortality can be significant in deer herds, and it was high in the spring of 2019 for Area 14. Wildlife water developments, AKA guzzlers in Area 14. All the big game wildlife developments in Management Area 14 were built targeting mule deer and pronghorn. They're very successful at expanding herds or sustaining herds during drought periods in areas where water is the only limiting factor. On that bottom right photo is of a big game guzzler built in 2018 in Unit 142 targeting mule deer. One of the best ways to provide water for wildlife without other multiple uses considerations is through big game guzzlers. Water is a limiting factor in most of the valleys of Area 14. On a map on the top left there shows the 8 big game and 18 small game water developments in Management Area 14. A recent planning in the South Diamond Range within the Pinto Fire was a hand planting project in 2017, 2018 with volunteers, NDOW, primarily myself and Mariah Collada out of Ely, BLM out of Ely, U.S. Forest Service, the Great Basin Park Service. All these shrubs were purchased through MDEP at the Washoe Nursery. There's over 2,500 bitterbush, almost 500 Utah serviceberry, and over 1,000 mountain snowberry. Due to our current drought conditions, we've had mediocre or limited results with the project and the reestablishment. Definitely another place to go in the future field trips to evaluate the results. Okay, this is the ongoing predator project in Area 14, Project 40. It was initiated in 2016 to present with a 3-year period where there was 1,460 coyotes removed. The response variable is 3 consecutive years of spring fawn ratios of 50 fawns per 100 adults or higher. The last time that happened was in the late 70s. Currently, NDOW has surveyed 6 spring ratios of 50 and above. Starting with the most recent of 2000, 1986, 1981, 1979, 78, and 77. There's, like I said here, there's only been 3 consecutive year series, which was in the late 70s. Years showing high removal were followed by years of decreased fawn recruitment. Predator removal, it just shows that predator removal is not the only limiting factor in management area 14. And you can see from the graph here, you have these bars that are orange that are spring fawn to adult ratio. You have this coyote removal, which is the dotted red line, and the total coyotes removed per year. You have these blue bars, which are the prior year, June through September precip. And you can see these trend lines, this blue trend line for the June through September precip tracking the spring to fawn to adult ratio as far as a decline. And you can see the removal of coyotes here not really trending with those increased spring fawn adult ratios, where we're trying to achieve that response variable of 50 fawns per 100 adults for 3 consecutive years. This is the collaring effort in Area 14. There have been 52 collars deployed in 3 years from December of 2017 to January of 2020 in Area 14, all on an adult doe deer. In Unit 141, there were 7 collars deployed in December of 2017. Those collars mostly showed elevational migration. In Unit 142, there was 11 collars deployed January 2019 and January 2020. We saw some migration between Unit 142 and 143. In Unit 143, 15 collars were deployed in December of 2017, January of 2019, and January of 2020. We also saw some migration between 142 and 143 with those collars. In 144, 13 collars were deployed in January 2017, January 2018. And in the diamonds, we only saw elevational migration with those collars. And in Unit 145, there were 6 collars deployed in December 2017 and January of 2019 with elevational migration seen. Most of the movement, with the exception of Unit 142 and 143, was all elevational migration. There was no movement into Area 10 from Unit 144, and no doe movement. And there was doe movement actually into Unit 065 from Unit 144, and just 1 single doe. And 3 does crossed west from the Cortez Range into Unit 154. Right now, we have about 11 collars still out in the area. Several of these are no longer GPS active, and you would need telemetry gear to locate these does. These are maps of the seasonal movement of the deer from the Roberts collaring projects. The middle map is with McEwen line gold bar exploration, and the project area is overlaid with the collar map. It is on the left there from the Roberts movement. The map on the very far right is just, I added the topography to the background. So the 145 collar activity in the center map was from a doe that immediately left the Roberts Mountain area after she was trapped, collared, and to my knowledge, never went back to the Roberts area after being captured. Spent all of her time in the Stevens Basin and O'Reilly areas of Unit 145. So this is not a normal seasonal movement that you can see here. It's just that she immediately got out of there after she was captured and collared, or it's not a well-used corridor either. Now, up here in the top right on that, shows the collar data and topography, so you could better see the importance of Mount Hope and the Roberts deer movement into Unit 142, which could be extremely important. I mean, this blue area that you see right here on the middle map and the right map is the McEwen and the gold bar projects, and then you can see Mount Hope right here, which is good, which, if funding is secured, could be the Molly mine in the future, and you can see how it encompasses those key areas of winter use stopover and in use 2, and then encompasses some of the migration corridors, and it could block those corridors. So these are maps of the Roberts Mountain deer collar movements and the 3 bars ecosystem and landscape landscape restoration boundary area. On the left map is color data showing winter use, stopovers, and migration corridors. The middle map is of the 3 bars project boundary and associated treatments. The right map is both overlaid together, showing the deer use within the potential treatment areas. The 3 bars project area encompasses approximately 725,000 acres, excuse me. I need to get a drink of water. Throughout Eureka County. The 3 bars ecosystem is a shrub steppe ecosystem where land health has declined so far, need that drink, that natural recovery without interventions is considered unlikely. This project EIS was signed in March of last year and outlines up to 127,000 acres of aspen, PJ, sagebrush, and riparian treatments. With this deer collar data, areas for treatments could be prioritized for key mule deer habitat work. You can see the Roberts Creek collar projects right through here, their movements, their stopovers, their wintering grounds, their annual use, and then this is just the 3 bars layer added with the boundary, the aspen treatments, the sage treatments, the riparian treatments, and the PJ treatments. And these are the 2 overlaid. This is an up-and-coming project that was submitted as a heritage proposal from Jeremy Lutz, who is the Endow habitat biologist out of the Battle Mountain office. Jeremy is working with the Casey Shedden in the fields department out of the Battle Mountain BLM office to capitalize on some of the 3 bars riparian and PJ treatment acres. This is to help protect important shrub steppe habitat found around Whistler Mountain. The PJ treatment will hand thin up to 1,500 acres to help native plants in the area. It's possible the work could start as early as October 2021 and continue through to February of 2022. Current cost is about $160,000 and proposed funding may be through heritage, habitat conservation fee, and Dream Tag funds. Also within the PJ treatment are several springs. They'll have up to 17 acres of PJ thinned to improve the riparian health. A few of these springs are Hash, Railroad, and Stinking Water, which I'm sure a few of you have noticed the PJ encroachment in those areas. So to wrap it up, in conclusion, there's several challenges facing mule deer herds statewide, and several factors are limiting mule deer population growth in Management Area 14. Endow, in cooperation with Eureka County, BLM, private landowners, and sportsmen volunteering their time and effort, have successfully completed several projects addressing mule deer concerns within Management Area 14. These previous conservation efforts have helped, but more needs to be done to slow or stop the decline of this herd. Hopefully through this MDEP process of coordination, collaboration, key conservation project will be realized, cleared and completed to help out this herd. And from there, I will take any questions about the presentation, mule deer herd status.
I don't think we have any questions here, Clint.
Okay, so with that, I'll move on to Tom to discuss the overview of the MDE process and moving forward and the updates with the sheets.
All right, appreciate it, Clint.
Yeah.
I got a pretty bright window behind me, so I'm not in the witness protection program, I promise. I'll make this pretty short and sweet. Clint already kind of went over some of this stuff and explained part of it, so bear with me. I'm going to share a screen here. Let me know when you can see that.
Got it.
Oh, that is the wrong one. Oh, is that the PowerPoint?
I see your deer limiting factor ranking sheet and assessment sheet, 7.
Perfect. Okay. So anyway, that's similar to what Clint showed earlier, but I guess first of all, I'd like to just thank everybody for your interest in this program and your willingness to participate. And it makes us feel good that there's people out there that are that passionate about mule deer and want to get some work done. It's easy to criticize what people are trying to do. It's a lot harder to try to be part of the solution. So we really appreciate your participation and your engagement. So having said that, today's meeting was kind of more of a kickoff and informational type meeting. In the future, when we start having other meetings about these limiting factors and doing field trips, that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. And we'll be actually getting a little more work done, having some pretty good in-depth discussions of what's going on and what maybe we can do. And as Clint mentioned, we'll get out and try to do a field trip. I don't know if we can come up with enough to bribe him to come out with us and lead a field trip, but if not, Maddie and I could probably get out there, and Caleb, and muddle along with some input from all y'all. Anyway, so before too long, somebody will be reaching out to the group. You're trying to schedule a field trip. So, I suspect we'll have some places in mind that we want to visit, but I'd also encourage all the team members to think of some areas that they think might be beneficial for the group to go out and look at on the ground. Either projects that have been completed that look like they're working, or maybe some that have failed or not looking good, so we don't waste our time trying to do that again, or some places that some of you folks think might be worthy of a project. But anyway, in regard to the mule deer enhancement program effort, the intent of this whole thing was to use more of a collaborative process than we have in the past, including people just from a variety of backgrounds, whether that's landowners, livestock operators, local sportsmen, sportsmen from statewide, NGOs, biologists, county resource folks. I'm not going to leave you out, Jake. But we're just trying to get as many opinions and perspectives as we can. And although Clint went over a bunch of the challenges that NDOW's aware of that mule deer in Area 14 are facing, there's no doubt that there are other people out there that have different perspectives and opinions. And that's why we're doing this process. The more of those we can get, probably the more effective we can be. And there may be some things that we're not thinking about or that we may recognize as challenges, but somebody else might come up with an idea to address some of those that we just haven't thought of. So that's really the basis for this program. And these sheets here are kind of going to be where the rubber meets the road. On the left side there, the mule deer limiting factor ranking sheet is kind of where we'll start. This is an Area 7 sheet. It's just the one I made a slide out of. Area 14 will have its own. But as Clint mentioned there, it just lists a lot of limiting factors. It is not a complete comprehensive list. It's pretty complete, but we can always add to it if there's other limiting factors folks come up with. And what we're going to be asking each team member to do is rank those limiting factors on a scale of 0 to 5 and how they prioritize those. What's the most limiting factor for Area 14 mule deer? Someone may say it's pinyon juniper invasion, so they'd give that a 5. Maybe collisions with vehicles, maybe not a big deal for a lot of it, so somebody might give that a 1. Off-road racing, I don't know how many off-road races are in Eureka, but maybe they'd give that a 0. And then once we get all of those limiting factor sheets combined, we'll average those scores out. And then hopefully the most limiting factors will be, averaged out and float to the top. And, whatever those top 2 or 3 limiting factors are the ones the team will probably decide to tackle. That's where the mule deer needs assessment comes in. And depending on what limiting factors float to the top, there's some strategies there that the teams may use to address some of those limiting factors. And, if conifer invasion floated to the top, then the team could look at, okay, where where would our biggest bang for the buck be for conifer removal? And, would it be mastication that they got it done there? Is it a better area for chaining, lop and scatter and what have you? And again, not a comprehensive list. We can add to that, of course. And then from there, those projects, each mule deer enhancement program team will be asked to kick, about 3 project recommendations up to the Oversight Committee. It'll be their job to prioritize projects on a statewide basis. And there's a lot of things that can go into that prioritization, things that the group can think about that might help bump their projects up a little higher on the Oversight Committee's list. If there's multiple partners involved in a project, if the federal land management agencies or NGOs or the county, and those folks are willing to pitch in or help partner with some of those projects, that might help it, rise on the Oversight Committee's prioritization list. There may be existing funding for some project work that could help it. There's some projects that may have NEPA in the works, maybe completed, or haven't even started. So that could impact prioritization on a statewide level. So there's a lot of things that can influence that, but they're going to try to do a pretty good job of spreading projects out across the state, and not necessarily do, throw everything at one unit group. So there's a good chance that most groups will, see some opportunities there. You'll probably notice there's a lack of federal land management partners on this meeting tonight. That hopefully won't be the case moving forward. We had to jump through some hoops and work through some red tape to allow BLM and some of those partners to participate. And I think we've kind of got over that hurdle. So we should be getting at least some BLM participation, potentially Forest Service. So they'll definitely be important parts of this process, and they'll be voting members as well. So hopefully we'll have those folks here pretty quick. But since Clint went over most of that stuff, that's really about all I need to share. So if anybody's thought of any questions for Clint, or they have any questions maybe regarding the process and moving forward, now is the time, I guess, to speak up.
So Tom, this is Jake. So are we individually take this when we get the form on 14? I guess you'll send it to us and we individually fill it out, and then we'll come back together and try to kind of get a consensus on it. Is that the plan?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that can be tackled, and what we've kind of been encouraging other groups to do is, don't necessarily do this in a vacuum. This is something that you can talk to some of your peers about, other landowners, other folks that that are concerned with mule deer, and just kind of have some conversations, discussions with folks. And what will likely happen is, following that field trip, then we'll have these forms there, and we'll have a formal meeting, hopefully in person. We get past this COVID thing, and we can do this however the group would prefer. We could either, if the group says, man, we'd like to have these filled out, then show up to the meeting and discuss them. Or if we would just want to show up with a blank slate following those field trips, and then have some conversations and discussions, and then have people do them then or following that, it's going to kind of be up to the group. But, like I say, it's not something, you have to not have any input from anybody else and, hide in the corner and fill it out and anything like that. We want to have some pretty good conversations. So maybe on that field trip, or just prior to the first, get together in person meeting, we can ask the group how they'd like to tackle it, either prior to the meeting, at the meeting, or following the meeting. It's kind of up to y'all.
Okay. And if there's anything I can do, again, this is Jake, to help, set up a tour or whatever, let me know. So,
yep.
And then if I can, Clint, Tom, thanks, Clint, really for a good presentation. So a couple things that maybe just get on everybody's radar. kind of addressing some of the top threats that you had identified, Clint, was on the PJ removal portion, and I'm going to turn the camera on here. So the Eureka Conservation District, we've been able to bring on an intern. And he's here with us tonight, and that's Keller Hyde. He's a range student, college student. He's getting some college credit to be here with us, and his primary job this spring, summer, or I guess summer now, is he's going to be revisiting. So we did cutting photos. They're all GPS, geolocated photos before we cut any trees and any of the projects that we did. And Keller will be going around to all of those pre-locations and taking the exact same photo, so that'll help us kind of determine some of the response. And then on the noxious weed side of things, the county commissioners convinced them they're going back in-house. We're hiring a full-time weed technician. We've been trying to do contract work the last few years and fallen way behind on some of our BLM stuff. So we have a couple current funding agreements with both the Elko district, which would cover a lot of the Cortez area, as well as the Battle Mountain district funding agreements. And anyways, we're hiring an in-house person, full-time county employee. And so, that'll help us to, target some of these areas through the county weed district and weed control. So hopefully that'll help us address some of those things. And then the horse gathers, that's always the fun. But Roberts Mountain, we're pushing really hard here. I know it is I don't know if it's the #1 priority, but it's within the top 2 or 3 of the Battle Mountain district in pushing it forward to get it gathered. And I just had a meeting out there with the BLM just last week. And some of those horses are getting on some of the private lands. And so it is, I think, going to be a priority. So hopefully we can get that on the gather schedule this year. And last thing, there's another host of BLM projects that are cleared that are kind of they're not all within the 3 bars footprint. And a lot of them are tied to that roadside fuel stuff and whatever. But I think, where they can go 300 feet on each side of any road or linear feature for PJ removal or whatever, I think there's some already cleared things that we might want to look at some point, or even in our tour, look at some of those areas if we want to piggyback onto some of those to address some of this stuff, because there are clearances on those right now. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. No, that's fantastic stuff. And that's kind of exactly the stuff that we're hoping comes out of some of these groups. And it's super encouraging. And of course, I know, and Clint knows, and a lot of folks know that Eureka County's been real proactive doing a lot of this stuff already. And maybe that's, one of the benefits of this process and this program is #1, helping show folks, people haven't just been sitting by idle, not thinking about mule deer and not doing things, that there's a lot of good work that's been going on. And maybe, getting some of that work you guys have done out there will just create some more momentum and create more opportunities moving forward. So I think Eureka County definitely has been some of the more, progressive mule deer and sage grouse, just everything in the sagebrush ecosystem, doing those projects. And I will absolutely take advantage of you and everything, Jake, because we're going to have a new biologist in there in Eureka before too long. And we're going to have to hook him up with some folks that have some experience and familiarity with those areas, as well as Clint, but yourself and some of the other Eureka folks too.
I knew Clint was trying to get out of here, but I didn't know that he jumped off the cliff, Clint.
Cliff right into Reno.
So are you doing the same thing over there?
No, the Western Region Landowner Comp Tag Biologist position with some other responsibilities with upland game trap and transplant, big game trap and transplant, possible bear response work, and of course survey work. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna miss working with everybody there, and I sure appreciated and enjoyed the time I was there. And unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but there's several of you folks that I really enjoyed working with, and I still consider friends. So I appreciate all the help and time that I spent there, and thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll need to tap into you for some of the you have a lot of water development stuff rolling around in your head. I think we're going to need you for that probably.
I do. Catch it before it falls out the one ear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you get buried in landowner compensation stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's all great stuff that you mentioned, Jake, towards that limiting factor and impacts and all the work that's coming up. That sounds good. I sure I mean, there's going to be more good work for the resource to come, and that's really good news in that area. So I'm excited to see that.
Done for us, Clint. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We'll need you up here weekly to count deer.
Yeah, I have to send, that's CJ, unfortunately, there. Was that Jamie that said that? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess if that's it for questions.
Right.
We can move on to some public comment and wrap her up.
All right. So we can move on to agenda item 4, which is public comment. Persons wishing to comment are invited to raise their virtual hands in the virtual meeting forum. Each person offering public comment during this period will be limited to no more than 3 minutes, or people may provide written public comment via email to ndowgame@ndow.org, which is ndowgame@ndow.org. All emails will become part of the public record. So with that, we will give a public comment period time frame. See if we get any comment.
Yeah, I suspect we can probably end the public comment period. We only have a couple of attendees and I'm not seeing any activities. Nope, you're muted again, Clint.
Oh, sorry about that. So if we don't have any other questions or comments, I move to adjourn the meeting at 7:30 p.m. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and participating. We're going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint.
Thank you, guys.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Sorry it was so long-winded.
No,
Oh,
that
it's
was
good.
perfect.
Good info.